sorry. Just please state your name and your address, please.
Good evening. Derek Kalin, 116 Ridgewood Drive. I just wanted to say I'm very excited to have this conversation, and I look forward to seeing the plan. I know that some other members of the community are here to provide feedback. My big takeaway is, I would urge this group to think about what does it take for us to start using this space starting in spring. The community gardens element is the most interesting part to me. And then, I think it's worth taking the time to think through the longer term plans as well. So I urge you to think short term as well as long term. That's all. Thank you.
Anyone else from the public? Come on, sir.
Hi, my name is Jack Alward. I live at 357 Parsonage Street in Rocky Hill, and I'm with the Rocky Hill Sustainable Task Force. And I just wanted to make a pitch for when we do the farm to have some for composting to be put as a priority for one of the agenda items, and to also prioritize compost collection and education, if we can. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you.
Hi, Tim Lewis, 34 Ridge Road. I was actually on the there was a unofficial citizens committee that promoted the referendum that, brought this to be. And so we promoted it. We had T-shirts, flyers, lawn signs. We had a table at the Fall Fest. And so, I really got a vested interest in seeing how this is going to continue. I've been watching it, and I've been very pleased with its progress. And so I just wanted to encourage you to continue. I did just want to say a word about the community gardens also. I just went to a class, it was a seminar, a one-day presentation or a one-hour presentation at the library on composting. And, it was nice and it was great, and they did a wonderful job. There were two master composters there, Yukon master composters. I didn't know there was such a thing. But, the nice thing is that, or the one thing is that, when you leave that class, you've got a handout, but it's tough for people to put it into practice, to get home and figure out, what have I got here? Is it a green? Is it a brown? How do I mix this? How much? Where am I going to put it? And all of that. But to have a community barn like we have, and like we do have at the farm, to be able to hold a class there and to actually show people, this is a tumbler, these are greens, these are browns, this is how you mix them, and show them the end result also, really brings it more to the forefront and helps people to accomplish that. I also would like to encourage us to have other classes at the community farm. Potting plants, maybe repotting, garden planting, water conservation practices, waste reduction, native plants, and the ever important permaculture, and maybe even how to grow fruit. So, all of these things can be accomplished either through maybe a garden club participation or the Rocky Hill High School or other members of the community, just like those who stepped forward at the library to participate and make the presentation. So I'm looking forward to that, and I know that there is a lot of interest in the community gardens. My wife and I lived in an apartment for a couple of years, and they had a shared garden space for residents of the apartment complex, and it was always tough to get a spot there because a lot of people who don't have a yard and or don't really know what to do really look forward to getting out and growing their own food, as well as supporting the local farmers. So thank you. Please continue the progress, and I look forward to the next steps.
Thank you.
Hello. My name is Mary Beth Maluccio. I live at 4 Kroll Farm Road. And I can echo, and I won't take the time to say everything that has been said, I would have said if it hadn't already been said. But another aspect of this could be historic information that takes place at the barn about Rocky Hill, the history of farming. And I spoke to a couple friends just now at another meeting about that because, you know, there's some of us who are able, would be interested in like being docents, where we would, it wouldn't cost anything for us to serve at the barn to possibly help with some of the education and or even be present on the property to maybe manage situations where we don't know who's going to be there and what they're going to be doing. And I don't know if that's been something you've thought of, you know, having people actually present on the property just to do that kind of thing. So I'd like to be available for something like that and keep up the good work. Thank you.
Ed Ciccarello, excuse me, 40 Riverview Road. I asked the chair's leniency. I have probably 5 minutes of comments here. They're all right here, and I'd like to read them. I'm wearing a couple of different hats tonight. I'd like to talk about 4 components. I did read the farm master plan. I'd like to talk about trees, topography, the proposed walking trail, and then history. Number 1, trees. The report speaks to planting trees to establish corridors for wildlife. I love the idea of planting trees. What I did not see, perhaps I missed it in the report, was the control of vines and invasive species. Currently, there are a number of places where Atlantis is growing wild on that property. And I think the plan should include recommendations, if it doesn't, to manage the existing trees, invasive trees, and vines. Number 2, topography. This plan calls for a 50-foot buffer between wetlands and agricultural fields to prevent soil erosion and pesticides from running into the brook. Currently, one of the fields is being cultivated directly adjacent to Sawmill Brook. So I would ask that this 50-foot buffer, or something similar to that, between the wetlands and the agricultural fields be approved. Number 3, I want to comment on the proposed walking trails, the walking trail that I see in this report. To those who don't know me, and Professor Liu, I guess, is on Zoom there, I'm the founder of Walk Bike Rocky Hill. I'm a former Park and Rec Advisory member and the creator of the volunteer trail manager system in Rocky Hill. Over the course of various meetings of this committee, this Farmland Committee, there was a previous walking trail proposed. The Minucci's, I think was their name, the professors from UConn, presented a map with walking trails that stayed on the north side of the property, going from the barn and past the community gardens. They never entered into the farmland. And I like this idea, and I suggest that this plan consider also an ADA component in this section by the barn for people with mobility issues. This farm report proposes a trail that goes from the barn, past the gardens, along the brook, cuts through the wetlands, takes a farm road between 2 fields, and then through the wetlands again to New Road. I could tell you in past town discussions that, and I'm not speaking for farmers, but farmers don't want anyone on or adjacent to their lands. Hikers and bicyclists should not be around farm equipment nor pesticides. So this plan that suggests going between the 2 fields, in my opinion, is problematic. It is also problematic going through the wetlands. Building a boardwalk and maintaining one costs money, time, and labor, and I would avoid wetlands and boardwalks altogether. I do suggest, however, figuring out a way to get from Rhodes Road to New Road and to the barn. Maybe, I mean, we need to explore interconnectivity through our roadways, right? This can be accomplished maybe by creating a dedicated trail on the perimeter. And also, can we think about using the 9 acres of land that the town owns to the south of this property? If we include that, now we have a whole different ball game. And my final question and request to this commission in regards to walking and biking and trails is, who is going to decide where these trails go? Is this commission going to decide where the trails go? Is Parks and Rec going to decide where the trails go? And I would respectfully ask that I am at a seat at the table. As a member of Walk Back Rocky Hill and a volunteer trail manager, I'd like to have input. Lastly, number 4, and I'd like to switch my hats to the role of president of the Rocky Hill Historical Society. And we want to thank the author, Professor Liu, and his students for including a section on history of the Rocky Hill Community Farm parcel. I reached out through email to Professor Liu with an invitation to meet to discuss the subject, and I hope we can get together after this meeting. We at the Historical Society have a few concerns in this draft report concerning, and we hope that could be rectified. And tonight you're going to hear from a professional archaeologist and Historical Society volunteer, Scott Spiel. You will also hear from our town historian emeritus, Bob Heron. Scott will speak about the Wangunk reference in this report, and Bob will share history from his extensive land search on this property. Briefly, I just want to say that in our opinion, the report needs to be revised in its language concerning the Wangunk and Rocky Hill. And if this report is to do history justice, we need to add Bob Heron's research on the property. And let me just take the final seconds to explain just briefly that the farm report states, quote, "The town of Rocky Hill was once home to the Wangunk tribe," end quote. Rocky Hill was incorporated in 1843, and research tells us that the Wangunks moved from Pequog, which is now Weathersfield, to Mattabesset, Middletown area in the 1600s. The report also leads one to believe that this actual parcel of land was farmed by the Wangunks. Quote, it says, "Historically, the land was stewarded by the Wangunk tribe," end quote. To our knowledge, we do not have any proof of this. Now, this is a very sensitive subject, and we feel it needs an in-depth discussion. Professor Liu and his students have brought up topics that are near and dear to us, history and archaeology. And we like this commission to consider doing an archaeological survey and possibly even a dig on this land. This would only help us to add to the information we currently have about the indigenous people of Rocky Hill. And lastly, I ask that this commission extend an invitation for Professor Liu and his students to meet with the Historical Society and our professional archaeologist, volunteer Scott Spiel. Thank you for your time, and I just wanted to say lastly, what a great opportunity we do have. Great opportunity. Thank you.
Hello, good evening. As Ed said, my name is Scott Spiel. I am a resident here in Rocky Hill. I live at 608 Cedar Hollow. I'm also a professional archaeologist, and I work for the State Department of Transportation. I do need to give a minor disclaimer at the outset that my views that I'm about to give are not those of the state, and they're not those of the Department of Transportation. However, they are very much informed by my 13 years of experience working there. So I'd like to start out, and I'm a bit disappointed in the meeting format where we do not have the opportunity to hear the presentation in advance, because it would be much more scholarly, much more appropriate for me to hear the presentation and know what Professor Liu has to say about this report before issuing a critique of it. Unfortunately, that's not a very scholarly, professional way to go about critiquing people before you've heard everything they have to say. For all I know, he's going to address a lot of my concerns. And here I am, cart before the horse. I hope my comments aren't perceived as too harsh for not having heard what they have to say in advance. In any case, my first major matter of concern, as Ed mentioned, is the uncritical blanket application of the term Wangunk to this land parcel in particular, and indeed everything Rocky Hill. Wangunk, by all indications, is a relatively late ethnonym, and one tied to a particular location down in the vicinity of Middletown, not necessarily Rocky Hill. Moreover, even if it's in its broadest application, is tied to people who are known as the river tribes, people who are resident immediately along the Connecticut River up and down from Middletown down to East Haddam all the way up to Weathersfield. We have relatively little indication of them living in Rocky Hill at the time. Now, of course, they knew about this land parcel here, and surely they crossed it and used it, but applying their kind of attributing their presence is a little bit hasty. We do not know factually that much about what happened here in terms of them. And the Straska farm, the community farm itself, is of course situated well inland in the western highlands of the town. As Ed mentioned, we have no indication whatsoever of what was happening out here at the time. So if we want to do history for Rocky Hill, it's only appropriate we do the responsible thing and provide an accurate history and not just some wild blanket statements about who the people were here in advance. It's only responsible for us to get all the information. If we're going to be teaching children of Rocky Hill, we don't want to be teaching them the wrong thing. We don't want to be teaching them fairy tales. Now, the only source referenced in this report that I saw for pre-colonial occupation is from the Chatham Historical Society website. With all due respect to our sister historical society down in East Haven, that's not really the most scholarly source, and it's highly doubtful that they ever intended that informative webpage to be used to attribute particular cultural occupations or properties to a neighboring community that's 20 miles up the river. So that's really not sufficient as a historical source for the Wangunk occupying Rocky Hill. Furthermore, the Griswold Spies map, which you'll see as figure 1.9 in this document, is included in the report. It was drawn by white colonial settlers, scholars, shall we say, in 1936, some 200 years after the disruption of colonialism, everything else that happened here. So any information what's drawn in that map needs to be taken with a full shaker of salt. They like to draw long lines and nice square boundaries on that, which is not necessarily what Native Americans were perceiving when they were moving back and forth across the landscape. Now, furthermore, many federal and state recognized tribes dispute the boundaries that are presented in that very document, as it disregards a much more fluid and dynamic reality of the historic past. There was history happening here long before Europeans showed up, a lot of back and forth between tribes, and then once the disruption of colonialism set in, it only got far worse. So these nice, neat boundaries of Wangunk versus Secog versus Tunxis are simply not tenable in reality. We do not know where those boundaries might lie. And furthermore, I would think that a town government, a town board, would be particularly wary of endorsing or attributing a particular ethnic claim to a particular region or a land parcel, especially one under their own municipal control that could have future political implications. So I'd urge some caution there. The second major concern I have lies with the appropriateness of tying indigenous agriculture, let alone specifically Wangunk agriculture, to this particular piece of land. Everything we know about indigenous agriculture in southern New England indicates that it was practiced mostly immediately along the major waterways in lowlands, such as along the Connecticut River. We've got plenty of evidence for that. That evidence is referenced in the report, which is highly interesting and useful, but it is not the same thing as what's happening in the colder, higher, more rugged, rocky, and exposed uplands characterized by the community farm. It is highly unlikely that this parcel was ever used for that type of agriculture per se. It was much more likely to be hunting grounds, perhaps shared by a number of different ethnicities, crossing these inlands away from the villages. Agriculture would have also taken place in relative proximity to the village, where you could have people out there from the village doing the farming work in relative safety, not in some remote inland area. And as far as we know,
could you wrap it up a little bit, sir? Sorry to cut you off, but could you start wrapping it up a little bit,
Yeah.
please?
So, as mentioned, if the town is serious about accurately representing the indigenous use of this part of town and this parcel, I would highly urge a professional archaeological study of the parcel. Many individual municipalities have their own statutes that require these type of things in advance of development. Especially if we're going to touch on history here, an professional archaeological survey is highly advisable. And I'm somewhat disappointed that this report never came around to this most fundamental and obvious recommendation for a land management tool, which is very necessary anyway. And lastly, I was going to wonder a bit about recommendation of reaching out specifically to the people of the Wangung tribe and inviting them to be a part of this project, quote, in order to help members of the community understand land stewardship. With all due respect to the Wangung members here, most of them are inculcated in our modern society. To my knowledge, none of them are specifically land management specialists nor particular experts in indigenous agriculture at this point. There are groups in the state who do practice this and could be brought on board as a great advisory unit to create some kind of educational thing about indigenous agriculture, but engaging the Wangung specifically in this is a bit of a questionable task.
Thank you, sir.
Yep. Now for
We have the
one
next
last thing
speaker.
I would say, I'll turn over to Bob Heron here,
Thank
our
you.
town historian. Any work about this particular parcel, as was mentioned, really needs to take into account the work that has already been done regarding this parcel. Thank you.
I guess most of you know me. I'm Bob Heron. We're calling me the town historian emeritus because I tried to retire, but they won't let me. So I'm still doing this stuff. Okay, this document I put together in 2019 when we first started talking about what we called the Straska farm at the time. Okay, and what I did was first of all I did a title search starting in 2019, and then walked the ownership back to 1845, which is sort of a watershed date. And then figured out who all these people were who owned it, did genealogies on the Straska-Persic family, the Boyd family, and then when I got into the second part, the names Belden and Lewis came up, so I did genealogy on the Beldens and the Lewises. So we know who owned the property, when they owned it, when they sold it, and who they were, is really what I'm shooting at here. Okay, what this title search looks like. What I did was, first of all, define the major property, which I'm calling Straska Farm, because I haven't been in touch. And next to that, the parcel of land that was used to be incorporated into that larger piece of land, who the grantee was, who got it, who the grantor was, the book that it's in at the town hall library, the page in the book. So if you ever want to see the actual document, you can look that up. They list the boundaries of the property, which to me, I think it's like a jigsaw puzzle. I want to match these boundaries up and see if I can come up with a more complete picture. Okay, what the instrument was that affected the property transfer. Was it a mortgage deed? Was it a quitclaim? Was it probate? Whatever. Okay, and then my own notes on it. And the notes are fairly extensive because I saw all those history things there and jumped on them, basically. So that first part goes from 2019 back to 1845, and I think of that as the watershed when this large farm came into being. I should point out that between 2019 and 1845, it was a lot larger. The farm used to cross New Britain Avenue, and that whole Straska farm was huge. Okay, and then they started selling off property for real estate development, and it pulled back across the road to where it is now. Okay, okay, then I went into the 1845, and I got that back. Let me look it up to make sure I'm not lying to you. I got that back to 1808, okay? And that was a bunch of little pieces of property, okay? This guy, Hart Lewis, and his son Eldad, and I want to talk more about them in a minute, but one of the things they did was start buying up pieces of land and consolidating them. And the net effect of that consolidation was Straska Farm, which is now the Commonwealth Farm. There is some pretty interesting history. I just want to skim the surface of some of this stuff. Okay, first of all, the Lewis father and son, Hart and Eldad, Hart's brother was the minister of the Congregational Church, which at the time says pretty powerful guy, because the Congregational Church was very, very powerful at the time. So he had some pretty good backing in putting these things together. Okay, they owned a button factory on Sawmill Brook, if you know where that is, crosses French Street. So they owned a button factory. Next to them, I don't know if it was next to them, but it was near them, Aaron and Leonard Belden owned a sawmill. And we know all of that so far. And our archaeologist starts drooling when he hears this, because they would love to get out there and start digging and panning and seeing what else we find. I think that's really an interesting historical and historical and archaeological site. Just one more story to get us started, because there's a lot of history here. There was a man named Caesar Freeman. He was probably called Caesar with no last name, or Caesar Williams. He was the slave of Elias Williams, who owned 1 Pratt Street. Elias owned several slaves, but when they called Elias up to serve in the Continental Army, he said, no, take Caesar instead. So he freed Caesar with the stipulation that Caesar would go into the Revolutionary Army, which he did. And we've got a ton of records on this guy. His marriage certificate, he moved to Oneida, New York, later on in life, and sold the property to Hart Lewis. And we've got his application for a Revolutionary or a soldier's pension record and subsequent records. So we got a ton of records on this guy. But it's just, I can't go into all the history. We'll be here all night. But I hope you can see there's some pretty interesting stuff out there on that piece of property.
Thank you.
And we'd like to dig deeper into it.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Another question I got is Charlotte Samari. Is she on Zoom?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
Hi, it's nice to meet you finally.
Charlotte, I started looking for, you were looking for aerial photographs. If you get a hold of the Historical Society, there's a man there named Tim Honan who can tell you all about those photographs and probably where to get them.
Thank you, guys. Maybe you guys could
thank you so
connect a
much.
little later.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Anybody else from the public wish to speak tonight? Thank you all for your comments and your concern about the Rock Hill Community Farm. Thank you all. Okay, we're moving on to approval of the minutes. June 25th minutes. Can I get a motion to table them? I don't have anybody here. You weren't there.
I make a motion to approve the June minutes.
Oh, he was there.
No,
I don't think so
not
either.
That one, yeah, that's one we're
For
tabling.
table.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve the September minutes.
All right, can I get a motion to table the June 25th ones?
I cannot make one because I wasn't there.
You can make a motion to table, but not approve.
Oh,
Yeah,
I'll
we
make a
can't
motion to table the minutes approval for June.
I'll second it. All in favor? Aye. Okay, September 24th minutes, can I get approval? A
A
motion?
motion to approve the September 2024 minutes.
I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, passes. Okay, now we're going to go on to the presentation, Rock Hill Community Farm by the Yukon students.
Online, I see Charlotte here online. Just a quick note. This is the first cut, the first presentation that this subcommittee has seen. So this is not a public hearing yet. This is for the commission to look at, take whatever public comment, which was very detailed and knowledgeable. Consider that. Recommend revisions, redrafting, deletions. Come back again to this committee before this committee finalizes and approves anything. We'll have like a final presentation, I imagine. Right, so this is just the first review.
Right, thank you. Charlotte, you want
Through the chair, my name is Andrew Lowe. I'm a landscape architect and the instructor of this class. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Well, through the chair, thank you very much this evening for the opportunity, not just for us to kind of present the preliminary findings. I think findings is too strong of a word. Really, the preliminary efforts of the class's work to date. Just to set the scene for those who aren't aware, we're a class of 23 undergraduate landscape architecture students who have been working hard over about the past 8 weeks on this effort. This report really represents about 4 weeks of work by those 23 students, guided by myself. And if anyone's had a chance to review the draft report to date, you will see that it is very wide-ranging in its scope, really focused on the former Straska Farm kind of current Rocky Hill Community Farm parcel. And I would like to just kind of comment based on some of the comments we've heard already tonight through the chair, that we certainly take no exception to many of the extensive comments, particularly as they pertain to the history of the farm, as noted by the gentlemen who have spoken tonight. Respectfully to those gentlemen, they clearly have a great knowledge and respect for Rocky Hill's history, and we certainly would welcome their input and recommendations as for how we as a group preparing this report could make sure we're being as sensitive as possible to a very interesting and deep history that we think is real fertile ground for further exploration. But I would add that history was just a very cursory part of what we were looking at, and that we spent a lot more time on many other aspects that the students will touch on. Anyway, in the interest of time, I don't want to take too much more of the committee's time, and I'd like to hand over to the students we have on the call today. I will say that of the 23 students, I'm so grateful to introduce Charlotte, T, Paula, and Yulisa tonight, who are great representatives of the class, and I think will do a great job presenting the report. Unfortunately, you've caught us during our Thanksgiving recess, so many of the students from the class weren't able to participate tonight. It's also one of these things where with modern undergraduate education, it's difficult for students to commit to presenting in these types of evening forums. But thank you very much to those students who've chosen to join. And we will do our best to kind of cover everything that we looked at through the report, and we'll be more than happy to take any questions and comments at the end.
Hello. I'm gonna present my screen so you can see the report. Hopefully it'll work. Can you guys hear me, by the way?
We can, thank
We
you.
can, thanks.
Okay. Just give me 1 minute. Can you see my screen?
Yep, we can.
Okay. So this is a really big report. It's about 100 pages. So we're gonna go through it pretty quickly. And yeah, so we're from the landscape architecture department at UConn. All 4 of us are juniors. My name's Paola. I worked on the regional context analysis, and so we're gonna begin the report. There is a lot of different elements to this. We have an executive summary. You guys can take a look at that. And so we're gonna begin. So really quickly, this is just a map showing. It's a context map showing where our site is located. It's in the Harford County, as we all know. This right here highlights where the town of Rocky Hill is. We have a zoomed in version of this, and then also where the site is. We also have, there's another map here showing it's a Rocky Hill zoning context map. We have a 5.5 mile radius, 1 mile radius, which is also going to come in the next map that I'm going to show you. This is mostly to show single family homes and also multifamily homes. Here we have a more detailed description. Overall, just as a summary, pretty much, we know that there is a lot of diversity in this town, and also we wanted to focus on showing the multifamily buildings and also like the other buildings in the site. So the multifamily buildings are the ones highlighted in orange right here, and then the rest are just like other infrastructures that are located here. We also have another image here showing the different bus stops, the bus routes, and then how they correlate to the site. Overall, as you can tell, a lot of people can either walk or drive to where the Rocky Hill Community Farm is located, but transportation could still be an issue for certain people. And so one of our recommendations would be to maybe look at a different bus route, and that's also something that we're taking into consideration into our designs that we're planning. So yeah, now this is the history. I actually worked on this part myself along with Charlotte. She's also in a Zoom meeting like you guys met her already. But yeah, together we collaborated and I came up with a couple of different diagrams to show different stages of the history of Rocky Hill. So first we have the last glacial maximum that happened approximately 15,000 years ago. This is just a map showing what the Connecticut area and other states look like at this time. And we also have a zoomed in version of where Rocky Hill was located here too. As you can see, this diagram shows that Rocky Hill was covered in a deep glacier, which, like I said, melted about 15,000 years ago. And through this event, the Lake Hitchcock was created, which also existed for about 3,000 years. And because of the melting of the glacier, we can observe that there's a lot of different rocks growing out of the Connecticut soil, which is also a big characteristic of the site. And I have a section here. This is where, if you look at the site, this is where this section is cutting. So this is what it more or less what it would look like at that time. And then here I also have another diagram showing the indigenous trails. So I have different tribes that were that used to live in different parts of the state of Connecticut. And like it was mentioned before by other speakers today, in the Rocky Hill area, the Wanguks were very dominant. They used to live there, and as we know, they mainly focused on agriculture and fishing. And I have another section here cutting through the same area as the last one. And then now this is a comparison of Rocky Hill from 1990 on this side, and then to my right, we have a 2024 representation. So we can observe how the residential development has changed from 1990 to 2024. In orange, you can see the new buildings. And same as before, I have two other sections showing giving you little bit more context of what we're looking at. Really quickly, I'm going to go through the topography and watersheds. So this map is a representation of the elevation of Rocky Hill, and we're using 10-foot contours for this. Here's the Connecticut River, here's Rocky Hill, and overall we can see that this place is mainly comprised of hills and valleys, with the highest elevations found in Central and West Rocky Hill, and the lowest along the Connecticut River. And we can also see that throughout Rocky Hill, the elevations range from 30 to 300 feet. We have another diagram here that shows the slope of the site. We're using 5-foot contour lines here, and we have two different view sheds. Number one located here, and then the second one around this area. So we can see the high points of the site, and also the lowest ones. And finally, we have different diagrams to show the different watersheds. So this one right here, it shows Rocky Hill, and also then this one here is more of Hartford County. And in blue here, we can see how the water moves around the site. So it coming from this direction down. The water on this side drains southwest towards the Matabase River, which eventually feeds into the Connecticut River. The water flow on the side is made easier to see with arrows. But the hillshade graphic that one of our classmates added, it gives the background a deeper look throughout the site, and you can observe the existing contours of the land as well. I'm gonna pass it on to one of my teammates who's gonna continue the presentation.
Okay. Hi guys, my name is Tagrid Hussein, but they call me T. It's easier for everyone. Paula, do you want me to share my screen, or are you gonna keep sharing your screen?
You can share your screen, yeah, if that's fine.
Okay. Give me just a second, please. There we go. Entire screen. Okay. Okay. Can you guys see my screen?
We can.
Okay. Can anyone hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
You can hear me and you can see my screen, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Perfect. Okay. So I'm going to take care of one of my teammates' slides. This is the part for landscape typologies. Obviously, within the site, we have so many different types of land cover, land use, and whatnot. So this just covers the different types of wetlands. We have polystrene emergent wetlands, polystrene shrub wetlands, and polystrene forested wetlands. I can go into detail about these, but I do not want to take so much of you guys' time. So I'm going to be as basic as I possibly can, and I'll try to go into detail with the part that I made myself. This is basically a food web that consists of the biodiversity that is present on the community farm. It shows which native species are present and how they interact with one another. This is very important for us to know because it helps us understand the site a little more when we're designing it, and when we're understanding how the animals are gonna interact with the community garden and the things that are there, and how they help and how they can ruin it, if anything. This one shows target species that were selected based on their native status, if they're threatened populations, and their crucial role in the ecosystem. Those species in specific, we have the purple milkweed and the white oak and the common crayfish. And the last one is the Midland clubtail. We have details on their species, the status, the habitat, the niche, the requirements of like how to take care of them and keep them present in our site because they are very important. I'm gonna move on. Those are a few more. We have the blue-spotted salamander, the spotted turtle, the red-headed woodpecker, and the little brown bat. Again, same thing. This is just two parts of the table just so it's easier to read. Now I'm gonna move on to my part. I focused on the species of the wetland flora. I've tried my best to get the most common ones from CT Deep. And over here I have about 8 natives and 8 invasives. They are ones that we actually saw on the site when we were there. We tried our absolute best to do in-person site analysis besides the information that we find online. It's really important to rely on what you see and not just what you read on the internet, because it can be a little inaccurate, but thankfully it was perfectly accurate. Now, Within Rocky Hill, a wetland encompasses a diverse range of species. It includes both natives and invasive. The vibrant ecosystem also supports numerous pollinators, which play a crucial role in promoting the growth and blooming of various plants, thus enhancing the overall health of the environment. I apologize, I don't remember the specific names, but we've had a few people from the community of Rocky Hill mention the importance of the wetlands and the buffers and adding walking trails into them, which I agree with them 100%. One of our main focuses in landscape architecture is taking care of these areas and trying to make them flourish as much as possible. So that's just to put that out there. This is another plant. This is another graphic that I've decided to show creatively. These show the different types of pesticides and fertilizers that can be used. Obviously, pesticides they can be very harmful, and then we have fertilizers that can be beneficial. Based on the dot that you see next to each plant, that represents how harmful and how, like, if it's highly or not very much affected by the pesticides. The plants that are in the pink box are invasives, and the plants that are in the regular boxes are the natives. Pesticides play a significant role in many farming and agricultural practices. However, they can negatively impact wetlands and their ecosystems. These substances have potential to contaminate air, soil, and water, posing risks to pollinators and other species. Fertilizers are also common in agriculture. They may offer benefits to wetland species if used carefully, but only certain types are suitable. Applying fertilizer in minimal targeted amounts based on specific needs of wetland species can help minimize adverse effects. Now, over here, I've decided to create a graphic that obviously labels some of the plants. This is obviously over-exaggerated, but I wanted to show the side that is affected by pesticides and the side that would be perfectly fine without them. We obviously have agricultural land, farmland, next to one of the wetlands, and it's actually very close to the ponds. And I suggest that we put a 50-foot buffer, which I think it would really help out our wetlands and keep them safe. I've also created another section that was taken from that same spot to just show how things would be if we actually took care of it and we put the 50-foot buffer. Maybe these plants can be, excuse me if I get it wrong, Mari marsh golds, which are plants that can help with the soil and its quality, which obviously will help our farmers with the quality of their plants and overall soil health. I'm gonna move on to Charlotte right now. Give me just a second, please. Okay, Charlotte, you can go.
I'm presenting on the community garden precedents. As we want this community garden to be great, but we also want like some backing on how we end up doing it. So we've gathered here 4 different precedents, 2 of which are up on the screen right now, which are the Uskasuduk Community Gardens and the Bats property. The Uskasuduk Community Gardens are an example of a Native American-based community garden where they focus heavily on food security as well as using the space for their own profit, where they will take the food and sell it out to the wider community. This can also be used by the whole community for, obviously they charge for a plot, but we are unsure of exactly how much. It's a pretty small community garden, only consisting of about 4 acres and only having about 8 plots. But they do have a 6-foot deer fence, and it's meant to serve as a testament to the Pequot farming tradition. The Bats property is a community garden located in Ellington. It's almost 45 acres. It has about 20 plots, so they're very large plots. They're usually around 40 by 40. They are very much so focused on only the town. So only people in Ellington can rent a plot or have a plot. But hiking trails are available, and they have partnered with local Boy and Girl Scout groups to make it more of a community thing. Another precedent is Farmland Farm, which is located in Killingworth, Connecticut. Also quite a large space, 132 acres. They do have a smaller section for a community garden, only about 12 plots, which are each 20 by 20. They have many amenities such as toilets, seating, signage, storage, fire pits, and trails. and a 6-foot deer fence to make sure that none of those plants get eaten. There are also hiking trails, and they put up a limit of 2 plots per family. And they make sure that Killingworth residents are prioritized. So Killingworth residents have first pick, and then other people can begin selecting their plots. Now, the Benson Crump Memorial Garden is going to be very essential in the way that this community garden is done, because I have spoken with Linda Ball, who is the manager of this community garden, and she has provided me with some of the rules and regulations that they apply. So it's a pretty big community garden. It is 5 acres, but they do have 135 plots, each of them being about 20 by 30. They also have many amenities, and before purchasing it, a contract must be signed and an orientation must be attended. So this is very focused on like the quality of these plots and making sure that everyone has a great experience with the community gardens. Now, how does our plot compare with the rest of these gardens? Now, it's very large. Overall, this is a very large space that the town has provided for a potential community garden. So there is a chance to have a very large community garden here, or it could be a smaller section for community gardening and other portions for, say, native planting, maybe increasing biodiversity. There's a lot of things that can be done with this space, and it doesn't just have to be community farming. It could be many other things. So to begin site inventory and site analysis, we wanted to look at the existing conditions of the site. Most of it is cultivated land and forested land, which makes a lot of sense. This is a farmland, and the forest is right next to it. We also wanted to focus on climate, just to see when we were designing, what should we design, not against per se, but basically focusing on wind and how that can impact the site. The winter winds tend to come in from the west, and then the summer winds tend to come in from the south. So making sure that there's a solid line of trees in the west to make sure the site is not too cold and won't kill off those crops with the first frost. Now, the site is predominantly loam, which is great for farming because it has enough drainage that it will be able to maintain crops, but it also has enough structure that with one big rainstorm, it's not going to completely knock down, all of this great topography. It is quite a hilly site, which does lean itself towards more erosion, especially towards the top, which likely is not going to be where any plots are unless people want to kind of move back those contours and sort of change the landform itself. But that is typically more expensive. So there is likely going to have to be some sort of stormwater management incorporated into the site in order to provide a safe and effective community garden. Now, in terms of hydrology, there are wetlands located on the site and near the site, which can be an issue when it comes to planting, especially with fertilizers and anything running off into the site with roadways, erosion-prone soils, or any sort of fertilizers. They can run off very quickly, and that can cause an issue for the wetlands. So there needs to be likely a buffer put in place, whether it's with wetland-based plants or anything like that, to prevent those wetlands from really being touched by agriculture or road runoff or anything like that. So when it comes to the vegetation that's currently present, there is a varied use, but a lot of it is, again, cultivated, which, again, makes sense. This is a farming spot. So we are hoping maybe to add in a little more biodiversity by incorporating in native plants, more meadow planting, something that can really invigorate the soil as well as help with existing animals on the site. Access and circulation. So this is one of the sites that we are very focused on with the bus route, as was mentioned previously, and trying to get people into the site. We're also looking at, walking trails and how that could be very important. We'll see this later in the presentation, but walking trails are one of the most important things that want to be on this site. So currently, the walking trails are pretty limited towards the top left corner instead of being extended outwards, so possibly looking into that. Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay, so for regulatory and environmental constraints, obviously there are the wetlands. Wetlands are super important and they have to be preserved. I know that there are certain wetlands that are a bit more important, but in my opinion, I think wetlands all in all should be preserved, should be taken care of, at least buffers to protect them. The constraints are to be aware of the 100-foot buffer zones from all wetlands on site. These buffer zones In these buffer zones, a permit is required before any construction of projects can be taken. The site owners also emphasized a 40-foot buffer zone from the wetland boundary. In this zone, no construction of any kind should take place. We also have arsenic contamination, which limits what we can do with the project. This was something that the farmers mentioned to us when we first visited Rocky Hill, and it's obviously very unfortunate, but there can be ways to treat it by using phytoremediation plants, such as sunflowers, which they currently have, but that is a big constraint, but it can always be fixed. Now, these are the different view sheds of the site. Obviously, we have ground level shots. Over here is overlooking the barn. This is the street. This is one of the wetlands. Again, the site itself. I think this was one of the entrances for the site by car. It's kind of difficult to get into, but we first got there when the site was still being constructed. This is the parking lot over here, which might be expanded. I'm not 100% sure, but that's what the students were working on. Now, the west side of the site should include the preferred entrance to be used by visitors. It should also include a tree wall or any plantings that can block winter wind from entering the community garden area late in the year, which Charlotte has mentioned. Site owners also mentioned a tree wall to block the view of nearby residential areas, which obviously would make sense. That is good privacy for both the community garden and for the neighboring community. Okay, so let's talk about opportunities and constraints. I can read some of these points for you guys, not necessarily all of them, again, just so we can be quick on time. We can add a tree wall to separate residents from the site, add a tree wall to protect the vegetation from winter winds, walking trails for circulation through the whole site. Obviously, more vegetation is important for biodiversity and ecological balance. Conservation of existing forested land and wetlands to support wildlife. The Three Sisters are amazing, it's such an amazing planting strategy. Obviously, crops like butternut squash, sunflower, strawberry, pumpkins, corn, and they would provide opportunities for sustainable farming. We need areas for community engagement and educational activities. That is actually very important. Every single age group should be using this site, whether they're children, whether they're the elderly, or just anyone really, students, college students, everyone should be learning from this site. It is a very culturally rich site that we should teach people about. It should be out there. Now for constraints, we need permits to construct or build things around the buffer zone or wetlands. Farmers' pesticides use would need to close trails. Obviously, we were speaking about how I think you need to be 150 feet away when the farmers spray pesticides for safety. That is a big constraint in my opinion, and I feel like we have to figure out a way where the farm would be closed in certain days or certain hours to take care of this. Limited amount of cultivated land may restrict larger scale agriculture expansion. Marsh area drainage issues that could complicate land use planning. Marshes impose development restrictions, preventing flooding of walkways or structures to ensure accessibility, potential habitat fragmentation. Winter and summer winds contribute to soil degradation. Winter and summer winds are a very important thing to take care of. That's why obviously we need to put big trees or plants that can block that wind so we can protect our crops and overall make people feel a little warmer on the site. I'm going to move on to my classmate, Julissa. She's going to do outreach strategy and speak a little more about it to you guys.
Hello, so my name is Julissa and I'll be going over outreach. So the first step in the process of outreach was to clearly define the program's expectations and needs and wishes for the community. So that would include like the farmers, educational sector, and the broader community. The methodology of our team was person interviews, anonymous surveys, and communication within the community. So the purpose of this was to gather in-depth information that reached broader portions of the community. Our survey allowed us to target a larger audience and includes demographics of the town, farming preferences, general opinions of the project. Approximately 250 members of the community answered our survey, which resulted in both qualitative and quantitative data. So this allowed us to personalize the Rocky Hill Community Farm and create the site design and program that is most valuable to the town's residents. The the Rocky Hill Community Farm project is still on its early stages, so this was a great way to help with the design of yeah. I'll be going into the demographics in our graphs that we found from our surveys. So the first one is the Rocky Hill population. The main important thing to get from this graph is that the population is increasing, but the rate of the growth is decreasing. The next one was the Rocky Hill age trend. So the average age is around the 35 to 54. The 65 plus age range is expected to grow. And the next one is the Rocky Hill single versus multifamily housing. As we could see with the graph, there's a lot of single and 2 to 4 family homes surrounding the site, more than the multi-residential houses. You can go to the next slide. The next one is the Rocky Hill jobs by industries. So through this graph, we found that education, waste management, and financial and insurance jobs are make up the majority of the population. The next one was also Rocky Hill median income. And so the median income is around a little bit above 80,000, while like families is a little bit above 100,000. And this helps us better understand who we are serving, and it's the budget of our the plots. So we found that like it could, with these families that live around the site, we could have more spaces for families who have 2 to 4 people in the homes, and if they also would be willing to pay a little bit more for the plot sizes. So yeah. So the next graphs are a result of our survey. And so one of the questions that we asked was, what amenities would you like to have on the farm? And from the survey, we were able to find that a lot of people really want walking trails and would like to have like group benches and picnics to be able to sit down and talk to one another. And the next one was, what type of activities would you like to participate in? And walking trails was highly wanted as well in that one, as well as a farm stand and farm market. So this helped us gather information. And also, even though we were trying to focus on the community farms, we also learned that a lot of people value walking trails. So that's something we found with these two questions. The next one was the growing preferences. So a lot of people would like to use the community farm to grow vegetables, but some people also would like to grow herbs, flowers, and native plants. So the next one's the opinion on the impact of pesticides on the environment. So from our survey, we learned that a lot of people, about half, more than half, think that pesticides have a negative impact on the biodiversity of the site, and very few of them think that it is a positive, like should be used. And we also had a couple people who would like to learn more about it, as they couldn't really give an opinion due to them having not that much information about it. So, next one. The next questions were related to the plots of the community garden. So the first one was how many people would they buy a plot when this design is made or the construction is made for the community garden, and we found that a majority of people already have a yard where they garden, but there are also around a little bit more than 40 people who say they would definitely buy plots, and a lot of people who are also pretty not sure, but we could see that at least half of the respondents would like to or are interested in plots. The next one is what size garden plots would people prefer? And we found that a lot of people prefer the smaller plots, which are about 10 by 10 to 100 square feet, and 4 by 8 that are 32 square feet. And this graph is actually really interesting as a lot of people put accessible raised beds as their first option. However, small beds became more popular for the second choice. Therefore, more people overall want smaller plots. But yes, a lot of people prefer the smaller plots over the bigger plots. The next question was, should plots cost less for low-income families? So we were suggesting a sliding scale price preferences. We were looking for those, and majority of people agreed with the sliding scale pricing preferences. The next one was, what is the maximum amount you would pay annually for a plot? And we found that a lot of the respondents said they would pay around $100. On average, it was about $75 for a plot that they would pay. So this chart is a summary of the findings and recommendations of the survey. You can go to the next one. This is basically what I've already gone through. So based on the survey and we made user profiles that are based on real people, and some of these quotes are actual quotes that we got from the survey. So we have here Dan, who's single, living with roommates and a cat, as a sanitation worker. And so he said, I'm not a gardener, but I look forward to what this property has to offer. Thank you for your efforts. And we also have like Daisy, that's a pet, that says winter access fences that enter the area is so we can have enter area is so we can have a huge natural space to walk. So we gathered that there's a variety of people who are interested in this site and going and visiting.
Okay, so we are starting to wrap it up. Now we are going through program analysis. This is existing site program. The Rocky Hill Community Farm currently has an informal program. Some farmers are privately leasing acreage from the existing farmland. As of summer of 2024, the barn structure sitting at the entrance of New Road and New Britain Avenue has been completed. The town now has a budget of approximately $50,000 to put into programming for the farm. According to Rocky Hill Town website, future programming would like to centralize around a community garden space for town residents, public hiking trails, continued leasing of farmland to local farmers, educational programming, and passive recreational opportunities for the community. So we have our master plan recommendations over here. I'm going to read through a few of them, and I'm going to have my classmates take over once I stop speaking. Historical preservation and education. Charlotte, do you want to take over this one?
Sure. So we want to focus on, as has been mentioned before in the meeting, education around Native American usage of the land, as well as specifically in Rocky Hill. Now, I understand that we may have missed a few things about and made some generalizations, but we would be happy to hear from anyone who has any knowledge or insight on land use, and we would love to take that and create a program, whether it's gauged towards children or for adults or for anyone, to learn more about the land and how it was managed. Recommendation number 2, as was mentioned before in site analysis, you notice how there were a lot of splotches of forest rather than there being like consistent corridors. So if you're an animal in those forests, it's very difficult to travel from one patch to the other without being exposed. So in some way, creating a nice sort of logical flow from one patch to the other, and helping out the animals flow nicely through the site. And I think with the walking trails, I think T is going to take over with that one.
Okay. So form a walking path away from agricultural fields and through renewed forest that will be accessible to users of the community farm. We understand that hiking trails can be difficult to access for everyone, but it's a much better idea than putting it in wetlands. Obviously, we can do it in a way that doesn't harm the wetlands in a very bad way, but it's best, I think, for us to do in forests. The proposed hiking trails will allow the community of Rocky Hill to experience the property in its entirety. Members of the community seem to want to access the site in its entirety, and a hiking trail will be roughly over a mile, and it would provide a sense of connectedness to the property as a whole. And note that any path through a wetland area will need to be a boardwalk, as these areas are subject to seasonal I'm sorry, I do not know how to pronounce that, inundation. Basically, wetlands can get flooded, obviously, when the rain season is very heavy. So it's best to put a boardwalk, just because it's a lot easier than putting an actual walking trail. Okay. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Can I take over this one?
Yeah.
Yeah. So for the local accessibility, I mentioned before at the beginning of the presentation about how a lot of people can drive or walk to the site, but we also feel like transportation may be an issue for other residents. And so adding a bus stop at the farm's new road entrance to the existing 910 Rock Hill Express or 47 Franklin Avenue bus would be a good recommendation. I'm gonna move on to the topographical change too. So we also think that preserving the existing topography to maintain natural drainage systems and reduce human intervention and habitat disruption would be a good suggestion to take into account. And as my classmates were saying, I just wanted to touch on the history a little bit too. I also want to mention that a lot of us are taking the history into account when we are designing our proposals for the class. And so I think a lot of us took the history of this site very deeply, and we believe that it's really important that other people get to know about it as well. And so I had a lot of fun learning about the Wangugs and also like other aspects of the history of Rocky Hill and the community farm specifically. And I'm pretty sure a lot other people too. I have a lot of friends in class that are like developing their design around the history of this place. And so yeah, I just wanted to um, just let you know and put a little bit of input into that.
Okay, so I, just like Paula said, a lot of us have taken in the history part of this. Professor Andrew made sure to have us understand what history means to a site. He had us understand what the site looked like before and the people that inhabited the site, the animals, the wildlife, the flora, the wetlands, all of that was taken into account when designing our projects, and it's a very important way for us to learn. As landscape architecture students, it is important, very important for us to be stewards of the land. I'm going to go into recommendation 5, and that also includes the wetland I've shown at the section of the wetland I've shown you guys earlier. This would include obviously the buffer. To establish or reinforce buffers between agricultural fields and all wetlands, it is important to increase the use of organic pesticides and fertilizers to promote the health of the habitat and the species that live on it. I understand that it's very difficult to maintain organic farming practices, and it is a very difficult thing for farmers to do. It's labor intensive and whatnot, but for the least, putting a buffer would really be amazing and very appreciated for this space if organic pesticides cannot be used, or fertilizers. So this is just another graphic that shows, obviously based on the numbers that you have over here, where everything lies on the site. This is more detail that some of my classmates went over earlier, which just mentions plot sizes, compost. These are the program requirements. I think this is what we are working on. Like, this is what we are, I'm sorry, these are the requirements the students are designing based off of. We have the plot details, the compost, the tool storage sheds, the deer exclusion fences, irrigation, barn, amenities, parking, trails, the pricing, obviously, rules and regulations, and last but not least, management. Obviously, there are volunteers for this, and then there's the actual farmers. This is just another site analysis. This is what we recommend as students, just in general. And these are our references. And yep, thank you guys for listening to us and taking some of your time. I will pass this over to Professor Andrew.
Thanks, T. Thanks, Charlotte, Paula, Yulisa. Really appreciate the depth and effort tonight. So just kind of through the chair, for some context of where we're kind of going from here, for the last approximately 4 weeks, the students have kind of taken the reports, kind of the findings and our preliminary recommendations, and they've been working individually on preparing design proposals for the community garden itself. So the report itself kind of had some recommendations that applied kind of to the larger farm property, but for the design exercise, which we will be presenting on the 6th of December, and we invite anyone from the community or from the town who's interested in coming. We'll be presenting from 1:30 till 4:30 on Friday, December 6th. Each of those students are preparing, individual design responses to that program that we've assembled. So with that, I'll pass it back to the chair. And thank you very much for your time, and we look forward to your questions and comments.
Thank you, Professor, and all your students for the efforts you guys did to put that together for us. I'm going to go through our subcommittee here and see if anybody has any questions for you or comments. Councilman Savini.
No, I thought actually it was pretty detailed, and I think there's a lot to consider here. So at this time, I don't have questions.
Okay. Ms. Clemens?
Good for now. I have a lot to go through.
Mr. Duff?
Yeah, I do have a question actually to Ray, just in terms of what this committee will be doing with the report. Will we be, I mean, it's going to be comprehensive and probably a number of options. And there's also some things like a layout of a design, from a design perspective, that probably falls within the framework of the committee. Then other things, history and such, which we probably don't have as much of a say on. So how are we going to take this report and then advance it to council? What's our next step look like once we get a final version?
I think your next step is to really study the plan, go through parts of it you may not want to keep. The original intent was really focusing on the community gardens, and some of the trail work in the developed parcel. I think we call it Parcel A, the 17-acre portion. If you want additional information, we ask, but at that point, the next step is to go through this and then come back with record, kind of, it's a workshop, really, from this point. Go through it, you may have differences of opinion, vote on any type of change, areas you might want to study a portion of it, those type of workshop type exercises, probably for the couple weeks.
And that would be, the students will work on this for another 4 weeks, and then we will take it after the final version, or we can still interact.
I think you may, once this committee kind of hones in on what you want as a product, you send, you let Professor know where we're going with study, so they can make, that's how I envision it at this point.
You're wondering if this is a one-semester class, by the way?
Part of it is just
Yeah.
seeing how that process looks and what does the back and forth look like. So I know we've got a short timeline, and the town, we've got a number of we have one meeting a month, and they're working on it every day.
Some of the technical issues that were brought up could be honed, that were brought up by the public, could be included and be revised. But this committee can't be under the same timeline as the students.
Right.
Right.
Once those technicalities are revised, then we have a plan that's accurate as far as the history goes, I hope. And then you can utilize any part of that plan you want as adopting the plan, as revised by the subcommittee. You may not want a trail here. We have to revise some of those maps. The access road that goes into Britton Avenue is just for emergency only. We have one, it's little things like that we have to look at.
Okay, so with that in mind, I did just have a little bit of feedback and I will start by saying I thought that it was a very comprehensive and good presentation. And I also empathize with the difficulty of presenting to people over Zoom when you can't see how people are reacting to things. So, to the students who did that, good job. It's not an easy thing to do. It's much easier to do when everybody's here. Just a couple things I wanted to highlight. One of the members of the public did mention looking to connect the Rhodes Road to the other portions of the plot. There's also some different parking around there. I think I'd be interested to see how we could make that happen in a way that wasn't also disruptive to the farm fields, if there was a parallel land, or I think the concept was also raised about using other land that the town might have a right of way to or access to, and cooking that back into the rest of the site. I also did want to know, I'm not sure if the students would know because it was kind of a local town issue, but maybe it popped up in the paper or not. But a number of years back, we did have some other farm fields in town where there were incidents with people who had who were going onto farm fields and doing damage, letting their dogs run. In some cases, they were vehicles. So there's a lot of reticence, I think, about having the folks who are using the parcel for recreation interacting with some of the active agricultural fields, not to mention all the work that's being done. So trying to keep in mind of how we can encourage passive recreation through design by steering people where they should be going and not in the actual active farm fields. And then I was also interested in seeing some survey results where there is a preference both for smaller plots and for more walking trails. So I don't know, and as folks were talking, I was thinking of, is there a way where you could do almost like an Olmsted-style park with a more overlapping trails or kind of double backing trails in that site, and maybe a smaller community garden piece, but maybe it's even like a botanical garden or permanent plantings, something like something that are points of interest, so people don't feel like they're just like kind of walking in a figure eight. But if there was a way to have more winding paths and perhaps some landscaping that would increase the walking activities, if that was going to be more of a spot than the community garden piece. I'm sure there'll be a number of designs that are presented during those design reviews, but I think that would be an interesting option as well. Even if it's not moving forward with it, it might be something just to jog our minds about how we can help better utilize what we have for the purposes that people would want to use it. But other than that, thank you for spending the time tonight, and great job.
Ms. Gilbert?
Can we critique peek anything this evening, or is this just basically the presentation? And because I have two strong views as being one of the farms that utilizes the property. So,
Yeah, you
do
can, but we should
you
also.
want me to express my concerns about this report as a farmer coming forward?
Yes, that would be helpful.
Oh, okay. So first of all, I'd like to, you guys did a very good comprehensive job with this report. You spent a lot of time doing this, and it's very well done. From a farmer's perspective, first of all, with this report, there are some adjustments that need to be amended. This town of Rocky Hill is a right-to-farm town. And within the ordinance, it says the right to farm is hereby recognized to exist within the town. No present or future agricultural problem or operation conducted or maintained in a manner consistent with the accepted agricultural practices as set forth in section 19A-341 of the Connecticut General Statutes, as amended, which engaged in the act of farming as defined in this ordinance shall become and be considered a nuisance. Agricultural operations may occur any day or night, provided such activities do not violate applicable health, safety, fire, zoning, wetlands, life, safety, environmental, or building codes and regulations, and shall include, without limitations, 1, the incidental noise from livestock or farm equipment used in general accepted farming practices. 2, odors from livestock, manure, fertilizer, or feed. 3, dust and fumes associated with normally accepted farming practices. 4, the use of agricultural chemicals, provided such chemicals and the method of their application conform to the practices approved by the state of Connecticut. And 5, irrigation and water management associated with normally accepted farming practices. So with that, I think the farms have the ability to use the proper chemicals to maintain their crops, their pests, their weeds, their insects and diseases. So I would like to see the strict, the taking out of saying that in your recommendations that you would like to see pesticides cease altogether. That's just not feasible for my operation and probably for the other operations that are leasing the land as well. Another thing that I'd like to bring up is that we practice integrated pest management. A lot of people don't understand what integrated pest management is. And according to the Federal Environmental Protection Agency, IPM, which is Integrated Pest Management, is an effective and environmentally sensitive approach to pest management that relies on a combination of common sense practices. IPM programs use current comprehensive information on the life cycles of pests and their interaction with the environment. This information, in combination with the available pest control methods, is used to manage pest damage by the most economical means and with the least possible hazard to people, property, and the environment. So, with that being said, that's my quandary on chemicals and pesticides. On page 93, with the master plan for the walking trails, you got to come up with a game, go back to game 1. We cannot have trails going through working agricultural farmland. It's not going to work. with knowing that there's chemicals being applied on this land, knowing that there's worker protection standards for the workers that work for farms, we cannot be inviting people to be walking through this area during any type of pesticide application during the growing season. Another thing that needs to be strongly considered is that there are farms that are GAP certified, and we have to be very careful with fecal matter and keep that under control as much as possible. And it's all in due of understanding and educating the public of why this is critical to keep our food safety program intact, because right now you're probably hearing about carrots on the news, and trying to keep the contamination down to a minimum. So that's a big concern. I say keep the walking trails either to the north or to the south, and everybody's gonna have to run up and down New Road to get from point A to point B.
Can you
That's all I
provide
have.
Daniel with your statutes or whatever for the minutes?
I'm sorry?
Whatever you just read off the minutes, I mean, the statutes, could you give Daniel a copy so he could
Yes.
use them for the minutes?
Yes.
Yeah, we did.
We did, yeah.
Yeah, she did. You gave me the ordinance. Okay.
Anything else?
That's all I have for this evening.
Fran, can you, all I want, how long is this class in? Meaning, do they go to the next semester?
Professor, are you one semester course here, ends in December for this class?
We are a one semester course. We kind of are wrapping up things in mid-December. I'm sure there are other classes within the university who may be interested or willing to pick up on our efforts. And I do appreciate many of the comments that have been made tonight. And, it'd be wonderful if we could, spend another semester helping the town and the committee think through some of these concerns and kind of have a more holistic approach. But I do think that, we've got a limited amount of time, and we'll do our best to make sure that we incorporate, all the comments that we're hearing. But I'm not sure that we're going to be able to deliver, exactly what you're hoping for within the time that we have remaining.
Okay. Because we're not going to be accepting this tonight, as you hear. A couple comments I would like to have. I think that amongst the history here, you need to talk to our town historian, gather some more facts, especially about Native Americans on the site, if they were there or they're not there, or if we have evidence of that before you include that. Along with the history is the right to farm declaration that is an ordinance that our town adopted. I think that should be clearly written into this document. I think integrated pest management should be written into this document. The farmers lease this land up in that area. They are using appropriate procedures, and there's a state that can inspect this if there's thought of that. There needs to be more research done on that. The students mentioned species of amphibians and whatnot, birds. I would like to know if those were saw on the site before we document that. Within this document, Rocky Hill, Hill was not capitalized in certain areas. If you could go back through the document and make sure Rocky Hill is appropriately capitalized. The trails in the farmers area, I have to agree, it's not beneficial for the public to be walking in there. Farmers are using a proper pest management and herbicides, and it's not a safe area for the public to be walking with trails. So I think that should be taken out. We will continue to have some workshops on this. I don't know if you're going to be able to get this document up to our committee's standards by the sounds with your class ending. So I don't know where we're going to end up with this document. It was very well thought out. I appreciate what your students did and with your guidance. And thank you for the information. Town manager?
Professor, just a thought. Would we be allowed to revise this document, utilize it, take pieces that we want, for example, the comments that were just made, as long as the history part of it is accurate, you can go ahead and write, and your students could present the final project, but once we have it, are we allowed, do we have your permission to go in and let's say we want to remove, potentially seizing all pesticide use, take that out of our recommendation, take that out of this plan? And take out
I think that's a really good question through the chair. With all due respect to the town and with all due respect to this committee, and I think a lot of the, as you put them, criticisms, I would put them, I would say that, a lot of what we've heard tonight is potentially exposing a potential conflict within the town between kind of farming activity on this property and maybe what the larger community vision for the property or hopes for the property might be. I think what I would do is maybe put this to my students and come back to the committee if that's okay. I think there's probably, just one of the advantages we have as an educational institution that maybe differs from a consultant for the town is that as a consultant, we're working directly for the town, we're being paid by you, we're being directed by you. But as an educational institution, I think we have a little bit more independence in the sense that, if we potentially perceive any type of conflict of interest or conflicts that we might be perceiving, we'd like kind of to keep our recommendations firm for the record. And we're certainly interested in the greater benefit of the community of this property, and not to take away from the right to farm statute that was quoted. So if it's okay with you, I'd like to put that to the students in terms of what they would be willing to allow the town to edit or change within our report versus what we would essentially like to keep stated for the record as our recommendations.
Okay, with that said, I think this would be a product of UConn, of your students. It was a study. They had their recommendations, so it's up to the committee to adopt whatever recommendations are in the plan or not to adopt them or decide, let's do this instead. But the product would not be changed because I'm hearing that they don't really want it. It's their student, it's their body of work, and they want to, these are their recommendations. This is what they think is proper, which is what we asked for. And it doesn't mean that we have to adopt this particular product. Just means that we asked for their help. They gave us their help. They gave us their recommendations. And again, as long as, if you want to make sure the history is accurate, that's important. But the rest of it are recommendations based on surveys and what have you. It's up to this committee to implement those particular recommendations or not implement them or, revise portions of them. But we're not changing the actual product.
There's nothing binding about this
No,
document.
correct.
They're making a series of recommendations. If they make 10 of them and the committee looks favorably upon 7, we could potentially advance those, and others, it just is just a document that they have produced. It exists, and we can kind of do with it whatever we'd like. And there's no, in terms of the course credit that they're getting, it's about producing this document. It's not about any subsequent action that we would take, I
Correct.
assume. So
Right.
they're giving us the recommendations, and we'll just take them as recommendations.
Right, and part of the recommendation would be sourced anyway, so, like a reference.
There was a mention, I apologize for hopping in. There was a mention of an event on Friday, December 6th, 1 to 3. Is that virtual? Is that town hall?
UConn.
It's at UConn. So it's like a class review. So do you know if members of the town?
That's correct. 1:30 till 4:30 on this Friday, December 6th, we have our final reviews where each student will have the opportunity to kind of present their design. And, we welcome, really anyone who wants to come and observe, participate in that.
And if people are interested in going, how do they go about that? I assume you have to register
Is it
or
virtual too?
It's in person on the Yukon campus, and I can send the information in terms of the location.
so like Ray, if someone, I don't know,
And
if you mentioned, but the public here, if someone wanted to attend, they would get in touch with you, or I don't know.
I don't know.
Dr. Lowe, would that be the public, or would you prefer just the committee? folks? I mean, we don't want
To
to
be honest
inundate
with
your
you,
class.
I think it's highly unlikely that you'll inundate our class, but I defer to the committee and the town who are our clients to whoever they want to send. So far, I don't think we've had anyone kind of commit to coming, but it would be great. We really, the more voices, the better. And certainly, we'd love anyone from the committee or the town to be there to see the work that the students.
Is it going to be the similar presentation that you gave tonight, sir?
No, it'll be completely focused on the students' design proposals. So, the draft report that we've prepared really stands on its own, and this is really a lot more focused on physical solutions of implementing that design program that we've developed.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for all your participation tonight. Okay, we're going to move on to number 5, discussion possible action, Rock Hill Community Farm lease renewals.
Okay. In accordance with the lease, the 3-year lease documents that were executed back in 2020, actually September 21st, 2020. Each farmer was required to submit an email or a document indicating that they would like to renew their lease prior to December 31st, 2024, and all 3 did. Fairweather Growers, Gilbert Farm LLC, and Hayes Farm all submitted their desire to renew their leases. And for some of the, for a couple of new people here, I have provided maps of the plots that are being leased. And just pass them all down. And this renewal is for another 3 years. Now, the renewal per acre lease rate was $50 per acre. My recommendation would be to hold that lease rate at $50, even though what I've researched, some of the new 2024 cash rental rates for Connecticut have, for non-irrigated properties, up to, some of it is up to $85 an acre, but this is, in my mind, and I think in the original committee's minds, was to help promote farming and help the farmers farm tillable property. So my recommendation would be to retain the $50 rental fee, the per acre rental fee at $50. After the committee makes their decision here, it will go to finance, because anything involving money goes to finance committee for their approval, and then up to the town council.
Is that $50 a year per acre? What, okay, I don't even see a contract, so I apologize.
Yeah, it's a $50 per acre per year. So, for example,
Roughly, it's costing about the farmers $500
Yeah, yeah.
each
Hayes-
parcel.
In Collin, on Fairweather Acres, they have more acreage, so they're a higher lease payment. It is not a money-making
Well, farming isn't a money-making thing. I could be very accountable for that one.
Well, Ray, if I remember from my finance days, the town's even limited in terms of the rent and proceeds that we can get under the terms of the bond.
Yeah.
So occupancy generally is given a priority over trying to.
Yeah, we're not allowed by the, according to the bond issuances for this property to, have what they call a windfall profit, even though it'd be very difficult for a purchase of $7.2 million to have a windfall profit in a short period of time.
We'll go back to that glacier.
Mrs. Clemens, any comments or concerns?
I think
Duff,
we need a
anything?
motion, right?
You need a motion.
To comment, right? So,
Yes, the motion could be
when are the leases due for renewal?
end of the month.
January 31st.
This month? Or, January 31st?
January 1st.
January 1st, end of December. Well, I make a motion to submit for renewal as proposed by town manager at approximately $50 an acre per annum.
Second it. All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Any opposed? Okay. Any other
This
business?
is for 3 years, right?
Any other business, town manager, that we need to discuss?
No. Meeting schedule?
Oh, yes, there is. I'm sorry. I'm so excited to get.
I hear you.
What's the last item on the agenda? Okay, we'll put it under other business, the 2025 schedule for meetings.
Okay. Scheduled meetings are for Tuesdays, 6 PM. Scheduled date is here.
Again, on Tuesdays, fourth Tuesday of the month, Daniel?
That is correct. I just want to note there isn't a January meeting because of the Board of Ed workshop.
Okay.
And if for some reason we had an urgent need to meet, we could schedule a special
Yeah.
meeting, I assume.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So same time, same day of the month,
Same place.
same place.
Make a motion to approve meeting dates for 2025.
Second.
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Now, get a motion to adjourn.
I make the motion to adjourn.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.